going on?
I know he sucks at lap battles, but
Let's start over the music.
All right, everybody, that was coming to you live from Daft basement.
He doesn't have a basement. He lives in Florida. I know.
Yes.
This is true.
I don't know when to start. I don't know when we do the music fade in and fade out. Like,
Whenever
I don't know.
we want.
Brian's gonna have to say we're live.
We are live right now.
It's our first
Yeah,
day.
Oh,
We're
okay.
live.
It's our first day.
I just hit
Are
the
we doing
button.
the music now or just not? Or I don't know.
I hear
you guys.
So Ryan kills the music, and then John talks. Okay, go.
All right, everybody, welcome to Black Hills Information Security Talking About News. Thank you very much for joining. And by the way, we have a very special show, not just because Kent's here or Ralph's here or Deb's here or Ryan's here or Jason's here. No, we have an awesome show today because of one simple reason. We're not going to be talking about ransomware today. We finally had some security news, and it to be honest, it all kind of like collapsed on top of each other. It wasn't just like one interesting news story. It was a bunch of news stories. And I want to start by talking about the first one. This is Gmail, YouTube, and Google Docs and other Google services hit by massive outage. So if you didn't know this, like last night and this morning, it was down. I was freaking out at about 3 a.m. Jason, because all of my slides for my class were on Google. And we're thinking of who probably could be behind this, and Marcello is showing up, so that's helpful.
Marcello,
Ryan,
we're live.
But Ralph, you had an interesting theory about this one as well. So what was your thoughts on this?
Oh, yeah. So my simple theory was all the services were down except for search, and they did that on purpose so that they could search how to fix Google, right? If that's not the case, then most likely what was going on is they were uninstalling SolarWinds actively within that 30-minute outage. That's my two guesses.
What are we going to do with SolarWinds? Just unplug it, man. Just go unplug it. Just rip it right out of the network.
Those are my two guesses.
Network.
So the guy comes running out with cables. I did it!
I did it! I did it! Like, who the hell was that guy? He was the intern. He won't be here much longer. And Ralph, they totally could have used Bing.
Yeah. Oh, we both know that the internet would still be down if that was the case.
So does anyone think that
ice cream? No. I want to know how to reconnect Google. Got it. Okay, Megan Fox videos coming up.
Aww.
Oh, no more disappointment. No more disappointment.
Austin Green and Machine Gun Kelly and Eminem. It's an inside thing. But this was actually scary for me because, how long would they actually be down? Seriously, if I couldn't get to my files, I was like, I was going to have to remake my slides for my intro to SOC analyst class. It was just going to be bad. So that was somewhat less terrifying. Let's go to let's go something really terrifying. How about we talk about this wonderful Sunburst backdoor FireEye article talking about SolarWinds. So I want to kind of go around on a scale of 1 to 10, like 1 being like an average Thursday where it's mostly ransomware, and 10, we're all hopelessly screwed. Where are we at on that continuum of badness?
I say 10.
Yeah, well, I mean, Google had issues, so.
Straight to 10? Why to 10?
Why to 10?
Yeah.
Oh, this particular, it's not that it affected FireEye, it's that it's already affected so many people. They wouldn't even know how many people it's affected, right? It's ridiculous. And this whole thing, as it kind of explodes out, it really has put what are you supposed to do? Like, you can't trust your vendor. I mean, there's so many questions, but I think it's really the scale. It's not just one company. So that's my 10.
So here's the Brian Krebs article that lists all the companies that they were able to confirm were SolarWinds customers. And you can just see this huge list. You got Harvard University, you've got Lockheed Martin, Microsoft, NCR, Ernst & Young.
Kennedy Space
this
Center.
is a bad list, right?
So we do have to put this in a box, though, right?
Please do.
Hi. So the SolarWinds update was what was affected, not the install from SolarWinds. It was just the update that came down, right? So if you update your SolarWinds, which a lot of customers do not, and that's one of the things we find on our tests, right? Then you're fine. which is saying like, don't patch. I don't know, but like,
Well, but that gets into you know, you're right. It wasn't like there was a vulnerability that they were able to exploit. They actually took over the update process for their software. And this gets into, I think, you know, we got to default to a stance of 10 until we know more about what the hell is going on, because every single one of these organizations could be compromised now.
sure.
And it could be that only a handful of them are actually compromised. We just don't know. But the panic that this is going to ensue is just going to be insane.
All right. So for me, this feels like either a good day for the people who planned this, right? Like, are they high-fiving each other and like, hey, it actually worked, great job? Like, are they popping champagne in the office? Like,
No, they're pissed off that they got caught.
Yeah, it's a
Okay.
whole cycle for them.
I'm going to disagree a little bit. I know I'm taking a bit of a contrarian view, because I agree with Mubix that they're probably a little bit frustrated that they got caught. But hasn't it been 6 months they think that they've had access to this?
Yeah.
For that entirety of 6 months, you could see them coming into work and being like, "So, did they catch us yet?" They have.
Suck. They
No one.
suck.
Not one of these companies have caught it. Okay, and they come back tomorrow and they're like, "Still, have they caught us?" I'm like, no, not yet. So
Oh,
Subaru,
come
like,
on.
you know.
You as a pen tester know that too much data is too much data, right?
Too
So
much
if,
data is too much data. That's
right,
true.
if they have all of these different places calling back to them, they're going to be like, okay, so where do we shop?
How many Cobalt Strike tabs do you think they had? Or like, I mean, there must be teams of people managing all these Cobalt Strike instances. And that's supposedly, according to FireEye, that's what they were using as their C2. Now, granted, there's a lot of other stuff in front of that to make this all work, but that's what they're
Cobalt
using.
Strike?
Yeah.
I do like
That's
the
what they
idea
said.
that John's
Read the
coming in.
article.
I do like the idea that John's saying they're coming in and they're going into like the not sock and seeing the not sock dashboards, seeing that they're not yet caught.
Not
Not
yet
sock.
It's the attacker, not sock. It's like, so, and I would almost see them now after 6 months. They're like, finally, it took them this long. It's
Well, here was another.
well, back to that whole like too much information. Like, who's like the interns? Like, all right, so you get CBS. Like, you're over there. Hey, you guys are good. You get the Lockheed Martins. Like, how do you divvy up this much?
I have no idea.
Exactly
Like,
how you said, by target.
Yeah.
So in offensive operations, you split off targets and you say, all right, here's your area of operation, and you say, and they perform actions based on end all goal for the entire set of teams, but it's individually segmented.
Their malware was pulling out domain names from inside of these organizations and using the company's name pretty much, or domain names that they were using to query out via the DNS. So like they were already categorizing it as it went, right? It's ridiculous.
I've got a question though on this. Like, does APT29 actually have like a job posting website somewhere? And the reason why I ask is whenever
Are you
they get
looking for a job now?
No, maybe. The reason why I ask is I think it would be really helpful if they had a job posting database, like it's in Russian. It's like, do you like hacking and things like that? And then if all of a sudden the number of open positions go from like 5 to 40, where like something bad has just happened. Like, because I think Rob's absolutely right. They're going to break this up, but we all have to look at this list. Do they have this many people that can handle this many organizations?
Right.
That's a tremendous amount of manpower.
Yeah, they probably do. I mean, I know the military, right? If you're going to break this up, I mean, you would also compartmentalize it. So like people aren't really doing the whole operation. They're only seeing really small pieces of it and just maintaining that, right? And, just think about it. You don't really necessarily understand the whole op. You can just understand your little piece and just run that and be, kind of a worker, like a little worker ant in this whole big process to manage, possibly thousands of organizations, right? So
Yeah. So I always think of the human factor and all this. Like, there's somebody who had to work late. For the last 6 months, like, I was just in the Kennedy Space Center. There's just so much to do today. It's all in English. Like, I had to get the translator. All this stuff. I don't even know what I have.
You laugh, but yeah, linguists are required. So one other piece of this, the one piece that I don't see really reporting as much, is that it's been 6 months since the update was pushed. We have no idea how long they've been inside of SolarWinds.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it must have taken them a little while to position themselves, get into that update cycles to happen.
Yeah.
So I've got a stupid question for everybody, like kind of riffing on that same question. So this FireEye breach, right? The offensive tools that was dumped from FireEye. So was this the same vulnerability? Did the attackers go in via SolarWinds updates to get access to FireEye, or are these two separate attacks? Because it seems like they're very much intertwined, and FireEye is referencing one and the other with their blog posts, but I haven't seen anybody come right out and say, unless I'm missing it, and say, no, this is how FireEye got breached.
I think they're insinuating it. I don't know if they said it though. Like they're insinuating that when they started doing discovery on this, that's when they found, this wider piece, right? And we actually don't really know when it was that they disclosed that, they were breached in relation to what they knew when they disclosed that publicly. So we could be in the midst of kind of like some information, but I would imagine that FireEye had told SolarWinds before this happened. And it does appear, or at least that they're insinuating that they are related, right? That this was after they were breached, they did an investigation as that's their wheelhouse and found this. We should also note that they were the first people, if that is the truth, right? If these are related, right? And this is how they were compromised, then we should also note that FireEye was the first person in 6 months to detect this activity.
And that gets into the same question of, you talk about SolarWinds, how long were they compromised? How long was FireEye compromised? If they're talking about their red teaming tools, and I want to talk about that as a completely separate conversation here in just a little bit, how long were they in FireEye's network? Because, could
no
the
more than
exact
6
same
months.
technique be used here? Go ahead, Rob. What was that?
Sorry, no more than 6 months, right?
No more than 6 months. That makes me feel great.
The patch came out 6 months ago or whatever. So that's the time box for it.
Yeah.
Hey, John, this reminds me of the one thing, like whenever we play backdoors and breaches with people and there's the initial compromise, but people are hunting, they find a little piece of it, but they haven't really found the initial compromise part. And the one thing that you said once that really stuck with me is that sometimes you find you've been breached by investigating something else where all of a sudden you were like, oh, wait, if I wouldn't have been looking for this, I wouldn't have even have found this. Do you think that maybe that's what this is? They were looking for something and they found something else?
I think they knew that their red team tools were breached and they didn't know how they were breached, and they started kind of going back and researching what it possibly could have been. So I think you're absolutely right. They're investigating one breach and they basically found another, but we still have no information about what was the initial point of attack, what was the initial compromise in this environment. We don't know what the initial compromise was for for FireEye we do, but we don't know what SolarWinds' initial point of compromise was. And that's kind of getting terrifying, especially if you're looking at a window of 6 months. Those forensics artifacts that would be helpful in answering that question may not be available.
Well,
So
thankfully, I was just going to say, thankfully, 6 months ago, nothing was really going on in the world that would distract us from.
It was calm. There was nothing bad happening. By the way, were there any voting machine vendors here? Like, is Diebold listed?
I do have a theory on how the red team tools got compromised. So
Go for it.
For those who don't know, SolarWinds basically stores credentials for everything, like domain admins, vCenter, like Cisco enable passwords, like everything. Like anything you want Orion to monitor, it can store credentials for. And one of those things that many people put in there are GitHub API keys so that it can monitor GitHub. And I'm assuming that either internal or external, their API keys for GitHub were in their SolarWinds box and were stolen out of there so that the red team tools were then taken very easily from either public GitHub, like the public github.com private repos, or an internal enterprise version.
And I had to bring this up while you were talking, Rob. On their website, their catchphrase for Orion is "one platform to rule your IT stack."
Yeah.
Which
Literally.
Remember from the Lord of the Rings books, that was bad. Like the One Ring was bad, right? That was
Too much
not
power.
too much power in one thing, and one vendor, one platform, one single pane of glass, one exploit away from total control of your environment. And I think that that's the other thing that we aren't talking about with this. At least in a lot of the articles, they're like, oh, a lot of people are running SolarWinds, but specifically what Orion is literally becomes the heart of identity and access management for an entire organization. And that also brings up some theories. We talked about Google going down. GIA, their single sign-on went down. We're talking about authentication issues, authentication. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's just terrifying whenever you think about where this Orion platform actually is in organizations.
So as the marketing guy on the call, I mean, they can change that real quick to like one platform to kind of rule your just add that kind of to rule.
Maybe
Change
just
it to Pwn, PWN instead of rule. It's Pwn.
own your IT stack. So, but we also have like products like CyberArk, Beyond Trust, like this idea of this identity and access management, privileged access management. This is not the only platform in the world that does that. Like there's tons of platforms. So one of the concerns that I have is the copycat effect, where we have a vulnerability in Adobe Acrobat, and then every exploit writer on vulnerabilities or writing exploits for vulnerabilities in Adobe Acrobat. And then it happened in Java. And then you're seeing a lot of ransomware. And what my concern is that this is like a dinner bell for the attackers. And they're like, wait a minute, if we can take over these platforms, we own absolutely everything in every single one of these vendors. So we're going to see more of this moving forward. I don't know what everyone else's thoughts are.
I've been yelling about SolarWinds since 2015 being the central thing. So like I've literally given talks on the thing like multiple times. And like I've wanted everyone to pay attention to this box for a long time, and it's frustrating that it's going to take this for people to actually do it.
Well, but can't that same logic apply, like I said, to CyberArk? Can it apply to things like LastPass? Because I can remember one conference that we were at years ago where we were talking about LastPass and these types of things. And I'm kind of switching off into a different technology stack. But my fear was, and I think it was also your fear as well, that once we start getting into these unified identity and access platforms that are storing all of this access, this just becomes that one point as an attacker that you want to get to. I'm not saying the alternative is better, but I don't think that people really thought much of the security risks around these different products.
Yeah, the only pushback I would say is when it comes to CyberArk and Thiotic and some of the other on-prem and off-prem password storage, they do crypto a lot better than the Cacti and Orion and all of these other tools that are more focused on IT management than security, right? So it will be harder for someone who gets access to like root on a Thiotic box or a CyberArk box to get the passwords out. They're going to have to do a lot of work. Whereas if you're root or admin on the Orion box, it's literally run a piece of code and that's it.
Yeah, well, they're not really hardened. Those password managers and vaults, they're a little bit more hardened than SolarWinds is really. It's because the other thing too is you're accessing credentials, so you're like, oh, those are sensitive. But when you get on here, you're like, oh, look, this box is offline or whatever. But you don't realize that it obviously has all the credentials to make those decisions, right? And SolarWinds may push back on the idea, well, you're not really supposed to give these boxes admin, but sometimes you don't have that choice, right? So, user roles like, identity access management, giving least privileges, it all gets down to this like whole bigger process. But, I think we are beginning to start to slip and forget that, this was a, supply chain attack. So like, how do you defend against that, right? Like how do you, against any of these products, right? How do you defend against this supply chain?
You know as well as I do that over the next few months, I think Dev Kennedy tweeted something about this, where over the next, probably the next year, every security vendor is going to be like, we're going to help you detect and react to supply chain attacks from now on. This is now the buzzword for 2021. It just is.
Okay, so how do you do it? How would we do it?
No clue. Honestly, and I know that there's a lot of people, well, what you can do is you can do code reviews. Are you going to get the source code for every single one of the products? Are you going to do static binary analysis on every single one of the products in your environment? What does that mean? Like if you're looking at something like Orion, how many dynamic link libraries, how many executables, how many different things do you have to do in code analysis? How many lines of code
Over
are in
1,000.
that? How many open source projects are incorporated into that commercial product? Yeah, it's a great buzzword, but the reality of that situation is far more difficult, I think, than most people realize.
So, John, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
So, John, what do you think is the learned lesson here then? I mean, if you can look at it and say, well, we could have done this, but that looks really expensive. What's kind of the learned lesson about this?
I think the learned lesson is overlapping fields of visibility, right? I think that the industry as a whole has focused way too much on endpoint security, where if you're running Cylance, if you're running, if you're running Cylance, you're running Carbon Black, you're running all of these different EDR products, it wouldn't detect this because it came in through an actual patch and an update. And your security inheritance is absolutely going to
it should detect this.
I don't think so. No, because if you're
in this case, it absolutely should, I think. And how it operated.
We can say it should have, but if I put up on the screen, it totally didn't.
I know, but what I'm saying is like, so this update, what it did was it patched this, patched a bunch of things that were other parts of SolarWinds that were valid, but it also updated this DLL, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then, so none of that should be detected. I agree with you there. However, it then later on a later date put a DLL into System 32 called net setup service.dll or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
which was the Cobalt Strike beacon, right?
And that should have been detected. I would agree with that.
That should have been detected.
That initial access, I think so I would agree with that. But if we're looking at a lesson learned, that's not a lesson to learn. That's something that should have been detected in this specific instance, correct?
Right. So what I'm saying is, just as you probably were already, is defense in depth, right?
Mm-hmm.
Overlapping fields of visibility. You're never going to get to the point where you're going to detect that supply chain update. Like if it's like a few years back, there was a Cisco one where they put a chip on top of the new Cisco devices, right? So this you're not going to detect that. Unless you're opening up every Cisco box you ever get and knowing exactly what the motherboard looks like and saying, oh, that's weird.
Dude, I remember years ago at DoD, we had to do that with a bunch of Cisco devices where we had to look at serial numbers. And I remember being in a warehouse on a skiff and we were going through the Cisco devices, popping the lids off of them. And then people were looking at each other like, what the hell are we looking for? And people like, I don't know. Like we were doing work just to say that it was being done, but honestly, it wasn't effective at all.
So the only reason we found a couple were because it was shoddy solderer work. Like all the rest of the board looked amazingly clean, and then there's this like crappy like third part, like some soldering job that I would have done. Yeah, that's the only way we noticed it.
Think about how geeky that is, Rob. That you had to open up a box, look at it, and be like, this soldering is crap. It's about what I would do. It's like, oh, that's how we caught him. Crap solder.
So the way that we detected it at a previous company, though, was that it was sending packets that were not designed for it at all in any way, shape, or form. And we caught that on the network layer. Like you gotta, there's so many things that need that defense in depth that know what's normal, that like, that's the only way we're going to get around these or get detection on these things. Well,
and I think that over the past few years, we've gotten too over reliant on that endpoint security, right? And when it fails, we just don't know what the hell to do. And like on the network side, that's something we've been focusing on with Rita on our open source project at Active Countermeasures, try to bring that idea to the forefront that we are blind on the network. Signature-based detection is not working that well because everything's encrypted for most different command and controls and things like that. So we need to be looking at our network and say, okay, user and entity behavioral analytics, we need to have good SIM information coming in. That's what Kent and Jordan teach in their class with the purple team, is how do we refine that signal to noise ratio, watching that network. But it seems like everybody's going for SOAR, they're going for single pane of glass, they're going for one product that's going to detect absolutely everything. And the reality is it's still far more complicated than just buying a single product and then all of a sudden you're secure.
I mean, also let it be known, EDR definitely did fail in this example. If EDR had succeeded, then we would, those vendors would have been reporting this. It would have been FireEye, for example.
Yep.
So, but, and then that just goes to your point about the defense in depth, right? We can't just rely on that one thing to detect these things. Should it have detected it? Maybe, but we could also argue that, what's to stop these attackers from getting that same EDR product, getting all of them, every single one of them, and trying this all out, testing it, making sure it's not going to work. They're not going in here random, and they're obviously they're not playing games here. So, this isn't, haha, I messed up, fun. They're going to be serious, and whatever money, it doesn't matter. So,
agreed. So now that everything's public, do you think the attackers will stop operation, or 2, start shoveling data out as fast as they can?
I think that they've already gotten all the data they need. Honestly,
so?
I think they have what they need by now. For 6 months, I mean, 6 months. Can you imagine?
6 months for that many companies, though. 6 months for that
true.
many companies.
That's true, but maybe whenever it comes to some of the mascara, and makeup companies, they did those last. But I think that they got the important stuff. I think they got the important stuff that they want already out of those networks. They already have it, and it's gone at that point.
I would take all the detections that have been posted publicly. That's what I know is being detected.
No retroactive.
And just change everything, right? Just be like, oh, all those domains burned. Everything's burned. It's all done.
Oh my God.
Before Christmas? I got a question, Ralph. Then.
Go ahead, Ken.
So, Ralph, if the idea was that EDR could have caught this, maybe should have caught this, but didn't catch this.
Sure.
Is there the possibility that the IOC actually got popped up in front of someone's screen and they said, nope, that's normal? And that led this down the 6-month chain of this is normalized?
It absolutely could have happened. Yeah. No, for sure. But it probably wasn't like a high alert, check this system right now. You are, know,
Do you know why they picked net setup service.dll?
No idea.
So net setup service.dll is something that is installed when you do a Microsoft troubleshooting thing, and it talks out very randomly from only hosts that run the thing. So if you have Windows 10 or whatever, and you do like hey, troubleshoot my problem on the Microsoft.com website, and they have the fix it downloaded, it will install that DLL that then will talk out to Microsoft to get updates or information on your fix. So they picked that DLL very specifically to get around EDR saying, hey, this is a DLL that shouldn't be talking out or whatever.
Yeah. So I got another question I want to ask real quick, because Marcello's here and he hasn't said anything, but I have to ask this question. So Marcello, whenever you read that this was an attack and the Russians were using it, did you open the article, like the Krebs article or wherever you read it, and started scrolling through and in the back of your head saying, please God, don't let them use Silent Trinity, like going through it saying, please don't use my tools, please don't use my tools, please don't use my tools, Cobalt Strike, yeah! It's not me this time.
Honestly, I didn't have to, because Silent Trinity is broken. So even if they tried, even if they tried, it wouldn't have worked. However, I brought this up to Twitter and started the internal chat. But honestly, like, the only way I see that there would be any sort of mechanism, a way to detect these sort of attacks, is to actually delay patching for 30 days. And setting up those patches in a honeynet environment, and to monitor every single thing that they do for at least 30 days, and then going from there. That's the only way I see that you can mitigate any sort of thing.
That's the way we were doing things in 2000 and 2001, right?
Yeah.
Are we going back to that?
I mean, the thing is,
sleep for 31 days now.
yeah, I mean, the initial backdoor was 14 days dormant. So you multiply that by 2, that's probably a good time frame. You have to do some risk management between patching critical vulnerabilities and not. But honestly, the organizations that have this sort of threat vector in their threat model would probably have enough resources to do that anyway. I'm not exactly sure though, how feasible it is from a compliance standpoint, because I don't know that. But honestly, that's the only way where I can see that this would be any sort of detection mechanism coming from this stuff.
And I agree with that, but I also feel like that's incredibly dangerous, because what this entire breach has done, and the reason why I think it's very, very, very severe for the community, is it's just created doubt in patching, right?
Yep.
It's like you have a vaccine and you got a friend of a friend of a friend or somebody that got sick, and now all of a sudden it's like, oh, we don't do that. And it's not that, the 99.9999999% of the patches are successful and safe. This one is in the news, and you're literally going to have CEOs talking about exactly what you just said.
Yeah,
where
but
now people aren't trusting their patches anymore.
Yeah, but the problem is like the thing is, even if this does happen once, the impact is just astronomical, right?
Yes.
Like there's no current, there's no like it's just absolutely insane, the impact, right? So like that's just something that organizations are just gonna have to take into account.
Well, I fully expect in the next year, guys, that we are going to see our customers, that we're going to exploit something that should have been patched earlier in the year, and the customer's IT department's going to say, yeah, you were able to exploit that. We knew about that vulnerability, but management won't let us patch except for once every 90 days. Like, that that's coming.
Yeah, and honestly, like for some organizations, that might be perfectly reasonable for some organizations. Like if some organizations are dealing with like some crazy government top secret, or I don't know, when human life is at risk or something like that, I don't know, but pick your poison. That might be completely reasonable for a threat vector.
Something else is going to have to give, right? Like if they want to go to that level of not patching, they're going to have to start severely restricting access to the internet and the internet coming in. And different workstations, like you're going to have to do something else. You're going to have to do segmentation. You're going to have to counter that, right? And I don't know if organizations will do that.
Yeah, honestly, like the only takeaway from this is that I think if you take away one thing is that you can't trust vendors anymore. Or I mean, you could never trust vendors, but I guess like after these particular set of incidents, like I don't think you should just assume that all the responsibility falls on you as the customer of a vendor. Yeah. Even if you're paying them insane amounts of money, and also that you should probably think about minimizing the amount of vendors you work with as much as possible. And use built-in tools.
That's a really big ask for something that has only happened once or twice, or maybe 5 times in the last couple of years, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. But the thing is, like most organizations don't even have this type of attack in their threat model, right? So we're talking about very few organizations that would even take this into consideration in the first place. And also, I think it's just the impact that it can cause is just absolutely crazy. So, I mean, I don't know.
You're also thinking, like, how much software does a company, even our size, right, use in a standard day? Like that, like that's a huge ask for someone to say, like, stop all Chrome updates, stop all,
It is.
Right.
But
I mean, that's just something you have to think about.
You've got to figure, like, what is your organization's threat model? Like, if you're looking at Department of Defense and classified environments, we had the low risk and approved software list. We had all the patches had to go through a vetting process. They had that high level of paranoia. But on the other side, for most networks, there was no network connectivity to the internet itself. So basically, we're making that trade-off of saying we're going to be really slow about our patching, but we're going to shut off the network. Now, once again, if you're Maybelline or whatever the cosmetic company is that was possibly breached, Liz Claiborne, whoever it is, maybe your threat profile isn't that insane. If you're a company like Kodak, you're probably wondering, why the hell are we actually still in business? So these, like, exactly like Marcello said, you have to be careful. But then you start getting into companies like Cisco. How the hell does Cisco actually handle this threat model without completely separating out their entire network into less secure, more secure enclaves? How do you define where those lines are? How do you make data move back and forth? This is a huge deal.
And for someone like, their product line is huge, and their software in that product line is huge too. I mean, the code base is, just bazillions of versions. I mean, I'm surprised something like this hasn't happened to them, and good on them for not, I guess, in the sense of from the software standpoint. I mean, I guess we've seen the hardware, but still though, I mean, like, it's really tough to defend against that. Really tough.
And for every one of these companies, which there is something like 100 that is on this list, what additional access did the attackers put in? Like, if they use this as a foothold, did they add domain accounts? Did they move laterally? Did they add additional implants? It's not an issue of just fixing this from SolarWinds. You're going to have other, like, legacy exploits for a long time. Yeah, Jason, raising hand.
All right. So I just thought about it. This has been happening for 6 months, right? During that 6 months, a lot of these organizations either had pen tests that took place or red teams that took place. So red teaming and pen testing was taking place while these other while APT-29 was doing this, do you think they ever cross streams?
I don't think so. Anyone else?
That'd
They
be a
wouldn't need
weird
to.
way to get caught.
They
Well-
wouldn't need to cross streams. SolarWinds has access to everything. They
Yeah,
would
there's
already be domain admin.
Yep, they had everything. Now, the other question is, I am certain that these companies had threat hunts. I am certain that these companies probably had lightweight forensics investigations. And once again, the fact that we're just now finding it out now, that's telling.
There's no good solution. The only like you can just mitigate and just prioritize. That's basically what you can do. I don't think there is a. And you know, the funny thing is, like, the defense in depth approach of things helps, but ironically, the defense in depth approach actually opens up more attack surface when it comes to this particular threat vector, because like the more software products you put into your organization, the more possibility that there is of like the more you open yourself up to supply chain attacks, because attackers have more targets now.
Yep.
That's the ironic thing about this whole thing.
You're saying
feels
if
like
I
we're gonna-
have Splunk and they issue an update, I should not trust Splunk's update? What?
Yeah, I mean, yeah,
So-
I mean, that's ironic. That's the ironic thing about this stuff, right? It's just absolutely a crazy attack vector.
Do you guys think that they didn't accidentally get caught? Or is there a possibility that they did this on purpose just to show that they could, right? Like they had all the data, like you said, 6 months, they got what they wanted to, and they had moved on to a different, just kind of like burning it, just saying, hey, we're done. I don't know. Just something to think about. I don't know if that's actually what happened at all. But.
Well,
My guess is that FireEye detected someone else using or accessing their tool set on GitHub or whatever, and then it started trickling backwards.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Like that, because that's what they released first, right? Someone getting their red team tools. So if someone accessed their red team tools and they saw an alert or a message saying logged in, blah 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 with SolarWinds box, and then they started tracking it back, is my guess.
is there a subreddit already for all the conspiracy theories? Because I want to hop on that.
It's already out there, I'm sure.
Yeah, do you mind if I just share one? Because I have one that just, when you showed the list, I already have this one conspiracy theory that John Hopkins is on there and that they used it to decrease the numbers that were happening in other countries to make America look worse. Fine, it's fine.
Look at that. Now it's a thing. It's out there now. Someone's going to pick that up.
Yes, and someone's gonna run with it. Like, oh no, that definitely makes sense.
And they're going to think
But-
it's from Jason.
So that's the problem with this breach and that many companies, is it calls into question data and the validity of it. Of all of it.
I will say that it doesn't help that SolarWinds also had like their customer list on their website, and they were touting like we have our product installed in like every government organization in the world, and all these Fortune 500 companies. That also does not help.
So-
That definitely doesn't help.
So how that works out at a corporate level is that I get a discount if I let you use my logo, and it's a pretty significant discount. And GE, when I worked there, they would basically cut off half of the cost of something if they could use the GE logo, right? So companies want that to make it show they can see other companies are also trusting them, so that issues that trust in that company. And it's absolutely a marketing thing for it, right? So
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
you're not going to stop that from happening.
So I have a question about the trust aspect. So I've been known to say at times like, oh, we can trust them because if they go under, well, half the internet's going under too. And I know that these guys are not that big, but they're not small, right? And I'm sure that there was some trust in place because others are trusting them as well. What does that look like for a long-term aspect for these, these companies that have, I think, gained trust based off the fact that everybody else trusts them? Is that in question now? Is there going to be a push for smaller market kind of solutions?
I see where you're coming from, but I don't think so.
Yeah.
Because like in 6 months, everyone's going to forget about this.
Forget about it, yeah. It'll be another Equifax. We'll all just be like, well, I guess we just still give it to them. Whatever,
I get my $20.
Times 100.
Oh, you can always like instantly right now see what the press release from SolarWinds is going to be later on. It's like, it was only one update. We secured all of the other updates. We we handled it already. It's not a big deal. Like it was just one single patch, and that's already been removed. So
And we're going to
don't
get
worry
free
about
credit report monitoring for all of these companies.
Everybody free credit report monitoring.
Everybody gets free credit report monitoring. Sorry.
Enterprise credit
There's your
report.
conspiracy, Jason. The credit report monitoring
Yeah.
companies are behind every breach because they're the only one that always wins.
Yeah. So I just feel for the marketing department because there goes their Christmas. Yeah.
Well, I got to wonder, do you think that this takes some light off of FireEye? Because you remember FireEye's name was Mud last week because they got breached. And look, I can commiserate with them. I'm not going to sit here and rip on FireEye. I'm not even going to rip on SolarWinds, right? But do you think the people in the marketing departments at FireEye are like, whoa?
Oh, yeah. Honestly,
The news is off us, everybody.
from all the stuff that's come out from FireEye, I think they were digging themselves out of a hole and throwing mud the other direction and saying, hey, dude, this really was serious.
Speculation.
Yeah, maybe. But this is one of my fears, right? I talk about this a lot as a business owner, and we do offensive stuff. I'm freaking terrified. Like I wake up in the middle of the night, completely panicked, checking my email. It's like, have we been breached yet? Oh crap! Google's down. Oh my god!
This is it.
Oh my god! But seriously, you worry about that stuff all the time, and this also shows that these attackers, they're willing to go after these companies like FireEye. They're willing to go after SolarWinds. Who's to say smaller pen testing firms aren't on that list too?
Well, I mean, they're going to have plenty of free time now. Look, they just freed up like 400 organizations they were looking at.
Crap,
The
we
whole
hired
team's
all
like,
the last 6 months to handle breaches. What are we going to have them do now? Oh, Black Hills Information Security. Oh,
that
Don't
is
put
not
that
a
out there.
challenge.
Do not.
that is not a challenge. No.
Jesus. Don't put that juju on us, Ricky Bobby.
Honestly, I think that while Black Hills is amazing, I think that if you're looking at that kind of threat actor, they had access to that many companies at that level, right?
Yeah, even a deeper level. And you look at other companies like Ernst & Young. That's one of the big 5 consulting firms, and they do pen tests too. Like you look at any one of these companies and you think about how this can spread from not just this level access. It's far worse than just the SolarWinds stuff for sure. Well, should we wrap it up? That was fun.
Yeah.
I really enjoy not having ransomware, but I think whenever it comes to catastrophic level breaches, we can dial it back to a few ransomware scores. This is a nice reprieve, but we can go back to that now for a while.
I mean, they can do ransomware now, right? They have access to all of them. They have the passwords to all of them.
Oh no!
John wanted news.
They've got us. Unleash the Kraken. The Kraken's like their ransomware for every one of these companies. So.
Jeez, can you imagine what effect it would have on the U.S.?
Oh,
On December 24th?
yeah.
No, don't do that.
Yeah, don't do that, please.
All we're going to be doing is coming on here and crying and just be like, we didn't mean this.
Yeah, we didn't mean it.
Jason's
We're sorry.
fault.
We didn't mean to do this.
Yeah,
All right.
it's like-
So Ryan, you ready to take us out, sir?
No?
Oh, we don't need that. I think Ryan's gone. I think Ryan went night. He went swimming in his pool. All right, we're doing this old school, Deb. Thank you, everybody. That was this episode.
Bye. Kill it, Ryan. Kill it with fire.
Kill it now.
Kill it.